Sanje Cheta Soje Jana La Chanju Bado Tane Jesu Tagu Chijin Jive Sanan Je Drola Benje Sanje Cheta Soje Chanju Bado Tane Jesu Tagu Chijin Jive Sanan Je Drola Benje Sanje Shu Sanje Cheta Soje Jana La Chanju Bado Tane Jesu Tagu Chijin Jive Sanan Je Je Sanje Druva Jo Sadan Lami Bidam Myo Chi Ong Bada Chechen La Su Chi Chela Chava Chava Sanje Shambara Do Chichen Teve Jure Juba Teta Cheche Tempe Chen Tenen Dire She Jire Teve Chechen Yedere Je Sawe Chechen Tenchen Cheba Tela Cholu Techen Kuwa Ye Tie La Benye Chechen Che Su Tse Me Ambi Tani Lepa Tula Tube Sunye Namo La Ye Kaitan Lutan Di Che Kaya Chupa Tata Me Ye Kainan Na Chova Kunje Chana Chi Samba Tam Che Kai Do Ta Che Den Do Kange Tona Tenchen Tang Umila Do Chen Chapa Sunja Sumba Meba Sanje Te La Cha Cha Lo O La So Ta Ka So Re Xi Wei Zhi Yin Ba Yue Sa Xiu Xi Zhi Ge Na La O Kwa Ten Zha Lai Wei Lan Mi Tang Nya Wa Yi Da Ten Zhu La Ma Yin Jie Wa San Bu Ma La Jie Wa Ni Ne Ba Tu Me Ne Ju La Jin Zhe Chen Ye Ho Da 女主给写这一百三天的说那些钱，是吧？那考天这来吧，他没当是干了，连年级先往前级，碰不得连期间了，俺那东啊街上现在没得吧，是吧？哦，但是就看这些简单呀，考天这来，碰不得连年级碰不得连期间了，俺那他当没当。 俺那娘娃一到村着他们也看见那样，俺那东啊街上现在没得吧？看这人生呢，俺那大这就看到见那样，俺那考起一东啊，俺那我没吧，我们没吧，驴羊那样都多吧，样样团面都多吧，样样人怎么着吧？炒米比人吧得差嘛了，要9、8千。俺听那呢，俺那没来这个那些东啊。 俺那他的起步运动啊，我他妈你了踏水，人家娃了擦仗，一到了这个，俺推着就过都听着了过街上给，俺那东啊听着给那娃印象，咱连年就希望就建议碰不得来新鲜了，俺那叫我上班慢一吧。 俺那看书的，那把土马给那就用把的气味干呢，俺那连年个希望的就碰不得了，那我就为爱情叫过过来是。 Yeah.
So, yes, now what should we say today? And there's a verse in the letter to a friend by Master Nagarjuna, which says the effect of it is that whether one is born as a god, as a human, whether one is born as a animal, a hungry ghost, or in the hells, whether as soon as one takes rebirth within any of those realms, one is inevitably has to suffer the various forms of suffering that pertain to rebirth within those realms. That's not an exact translation of that verse, but that's the basic point of it. And so what this means is that as soon as we've taken up these contaminated aggregates, the aggregates themselves are contaminated because they've been taken up by the force of contaminated karma and mental affliction. As soon as we take them up, we necessarily have to suffer. And it doesn't matter where we're born within the different realms of samsara. If we're born as a god or as a human, then we have to suffer there the specific sufferings that pertain to those rebirths. Death is inevitable for everyone born even in the god realms or as a human, of course. And then likewise with respect to the lower realms of the hungry ghosts, the animals, the hell beings, they also have, they suffer from the different sufferings that one finds there. other. So there are specific sufferings that pertain to the individual realms of existence, the individual, we can call them destinies, places within which sentient beings can be reborn. If one is born as a human or a god, then of course one has to undergo death at the end of a process of aging for humans and the lower level gods, and death at the end of that, which impels one to transmigrate into some other realm of existence. And then even in the upper realms of meditative absorption, there's death occurs and one has to transmigrate, even if gross forms of suffering don't occur there. And then within the human realm, of course, there's all the different various sufferings of being high and low, aging, sickness, and so forth. And even in the God realms, if one is born as a demigod, then one suffers from contention and fighting with the gods, and has a jealousy of the gods' sort of rebirth. And then in the upper God realms, one suffers from the recognition of one's death, the approach of death, and that one has to transmigrate and usually fall into a lower realm of existence. So those particular sufferings are found there, and others as well. And then in the lower realms of existence, of course, in the hells, they suffer especially from heat and cold. The hungry ghosts, so-called, or pretas, suffer from hunger and thirst. Animals suffer from being dominated by others, and all the other forms of suffering. So there are specific forms of suffering that are found in the individual realms, and then there are general forms of suffering, such as la gendi duk kasa chi dunga di duk mang kasa. I forgot the 6 sort of general sufferings that pertain to samsara in general. Chi dunga duk di dengimendu Koi chi dunga duk.
Ho chi dunga. Da siwi tri la so na ri chen. Daniel ngawa me ba. Koi pinzo la chi sam ji jang wa ba me ba. Ani lü yang da yang do tor wa. Ani yang yang twamen do jo wa. Yang yang nin zam jo wa. Cho me ba. So
there's 6 sufferings that are general and apply to all of the different realms of samsara, that there's no certainty within samsara as far as where one's going to be. There's no satisfaction, ultimate true satisfaction to be found within samsara. One has to give up one's body over and over again. Whenever one is born in samsara, inevitably one has to cast aside one's body, has to take rebirth over and over again, and then we're lost. I'm lost. I'm lost.
Ani lü yang dan yang do tor wa. Re dan ye pong bo nya ba ni ji de ju ji so na ji lü yang dan yang do to yu nu a. Ani yang twa men do ju wa jia ji ji de che ju na ni le ji wang ge qiang sa jin lo. Ko lü ju wa ni do ju ni ko wa da jiang zhe ni do tong so na ji jian ni yang twa men do ju ni ma.
So one always falls from higher states of existence into lower states of existence, even though we've been emperors ruling over the whole world. We've lost that status over and over again.
Oh yeah, then yang nin zhen zhe de zhe wa ya. Yang da yang do nya wa yi sa xue nang zu tu jia zhe nang ge qu le yang tai le sa bi me san na xin. Da kan jie mo jie yang nin zhen zhe yu niu wa, nin zhen zhe yu niu wa. Ani da ka se te da kan jie chuo me bi yan wa zhe.
So we have to take rebirth, meaning be conceived in different rebirths over and over again. There's a verse which describes that, showing that it's like an ocean of mothers that we've had within whom we've been conceived, and the different states of existence we've been conceived within are in limitless. And then finally, when we die and go into the next life, we do so without not being accompanied by any of our friends or relatives or whatever. We can't take anything with us.
Oh yeah, that is I know what Chitang Cheraki to Matatat. That Castle Sachani Pumbo de Sigela, and a Dunga Gerashina, Madena, Madeva Yeza, and a Dunga la Medena, and a Dunga Bangue. Dunga Bangala, Dunga, and a Tatawa, Kana Chun, Dunga Kana Chusak, she Sajani Pumbo de Pangore. There, Moa Chabala, and a Nili Pumbo Dujaki Le. Sona Mayan be less of the Pangore. Let the sober Pangala, let the Queen launch Chatham Monson. Chatham Monson go Queen Lande, and the son of the Sona Mayan be less, Mule, Sache, Joe to Gioza. Chatham Monson gets our Tang, and it's a dancing Maribala, Tony. That dancing Maribal, Maban Chingela, and a lane you get your middle. Lenny Joa Mido Bayeza, and the Dunga Mido Bayeza, that Castle Dunga Tamje Zawade, and the dancing Mariba in the Bayimbe, and the dancing Marimba Bongo Bayeza, Nimonjana Mali Gizola, Talajuma, Loy Tonjuji. Dani di you do that door channel, Najoba, Dani Gobache, Chene, Anuma Jubala Sovanashi, Nimu be joined the career Esana, and it Jawata, Nawata, Kawata Chua, Tajisuagi, and it what te Nimu be joined in Bare. Te Toba Chevala, Nimon Pangores, Nimunga Zawade, and it dancing Maribare, Senimojana Jizola Telechuma, Loy Tonjujis. Dani di you do door channel. Najoba Dan and Gobache, say Galanda, Tambo de that's Casa or Kanadena Tavanga, Cansate. De Nanzing me to Toba Chenem. Any Najoba Dan and Gobache, say Dancing me, Kansaki, Ranshi Trua. And Gobi, Gabi, and Rashi Truba Gade, and Rashi Casa Rashi Tribute, Tomba, Kasakatame, and it's Hemetella Pop. Only 10 combat corner, Conto Sawala, that dancing Bongo is a Toma, and a damn bit the team.
So then, this whole mass of suffering, if we talk about the specific sufferings that the individual beings in all of these realms of existence undergo, or the general sufferings which pertain to all of the different realms, in either case, this whole mass of suffering, which is samsara, is itself the aggregates which are contaminated. That is, the contaminated aggregates are samsara. It's not some external thing, but it's the experiences of the beings existing within these contaminated aggregates. So the contaminated aggregates themselves are, they arise, or they're created by contaminated karma and mental affliction. And contaminated karma, again, is sort of the proximate cause for the rising of a particular instance of the contaminated aggregates. But underlying that, the mental afflictions are what give rise to contaminated karma. The mental afflictions are the motive forces that induce us to engage in virtuous or non-virtuous or what are called unwavering actions, which produce rebirth in all of the different realms of existence. And so that being the case, since the cause of the contaminated karma is the mental afflictions, here we can subsume them under three headings of attachment, hate, anger, and confusion, the three poisons, or desire, hatred, and ignorance, another way to enumerate them. These three poisons themselves, in all their different forms, are rooted fundamentally in the misapprehension of the self. This is the form of ignorance which is the root of samsara, the fundamental cause of samsara. The misapprehension of the self, it comes about from a misconception or misapprehension of the aggregates themselves, taking the aggregates as if they were real. Then one superimposes upon them the notion of a real self or I, and what's happening there is that when one observes the aggregates as a basis, one then designates upon that basis an I or a self. But and there is an existing I or self which actually is validly designated based upon the aggregates. But because of our misapprehension of things as being real, we misconstrue the I or the self as if it was real, as if it possessed a kind of autonomous character or existed by means of its own intrinsic nature. And it's that fundamental misapprehension of the I or the self which is the root ignorance which gives rise to samsaric, all of samsara, the contaminated aggregates. So in order to, if we want to get rid of this mass of suffering, which is samsara, then we have to eliminate the root cause. If we simply temporarily remove some of the proximate causes like karma or the other mental afflictions that are not like anger and attachment and so forth, that won't eliminate the fundamental cause that gives rise to samsara. Rather, one has to first of all, understand what the root ignorance is, this basic form of ignorance, and then develop the antidote to it through gaining an understanding of the way in which the I or the self actually exists, not the way it's misconceived by this false conception that the self or the I is real. And so one needs to establish that through avenues of valid cognition, inference in particular, and so that's the method, initial method for ascertaining a correct understanding of the nature of the self or the I. And then once one has that, one can engage in meditative cultivation of that understanding and eventually develop the direct realization of absence of self, which is the direct antidote to the misconception of the self or the basic ignorance which gives rise to samsara.
Oh yeah, 다시 저와 올라마지 경고이지 시비사변 남셰디 유남 대이 제유로 유라 담에 통나니 시비사변 가바주르세 오 가르송 거래서 시비사변 남셰디에서 시바코와 코르지지 그 주소 가르래서나 안에 다도 잡아집에 단지 말해봐 시비사변 남셰 유남 대이 제유로 유라 담에 통나니 텐자위 아니 다도 집에 당신지기 현유 아니 가서로 라시지 매밤 다도 마주바데 토나 아니 시비사변가 텐자위 아니 다도 마주베 로데 아니 통성 광바 채와라 때네 아니 당신 다도 집에 집에 빵데 아니 집에 빵와디 용어를 소하데 대단 아니 다대 가서래 다 되는 좋아래 지와 남진나라야 돼 디유스유 매반이 대봉완이 뉴반이 당진기 현유 수만봉와 아니 다도 집에 뽕 마요와다 다 토마 당진기 현유 매바 tombe 아니 돈이 tom바니 된다 봐봐도 다 이때 말에 가셔와대
So this is also expressed in a verse in the introduction to the middle way, Madhyamaka Avatara, and there it says the same exact thing is said there in some different words. But here in this text, in the 400 of Master Aryadeva, there's a verse which is coming, which says that the seed of existence is consciousness. Sipe sabun namshite.
Sipe sabun namshite. Siba kowa. Quality drum, any do this drum, Sabine Carres and Tadu Subatsibe.
Sipe sabun namshite, didn't he?
You let them tonani, Sibi Sabun
So it says there that the seed of existence is consciousness. And so the seed of existence here is, I'm sorry, I'm freezing up here. Sibe sabun namshite. Sibe sabun
namshite. Siba kowa jiji drum sabun carres and Tadu Subatsibe.
Sibe sabun namshite. 대주유.
유놈 대주유로 남시대 주유래 나도 좋았지.
오케이.
나도 좋아돼. 나도 좋았지. 남시대기 아니 유로 와. 진짜.
That's a big. I'm sorry, my brain's freezing up right now. So the basic gist of that verse is that the root of existence is consciousness, and the consciousness that's root of existence here is shorthand for samsara, all of samsara, and so the root of that consciousness being the root of that, the specific consciousness that's indicated in this verse is the misapprehension of the self as being real. That particular form of misapprehension, it's not just consciousness in general, but the misapprehension of the self as being real. And then the remainder of that verse says the sphere of activity of that, the objects that are deichuyul kari. What's the rest of that verse? Deichuyu. No, deichuyu.
주유.
So the objects then are the sphere of activity of that, meaning that that misapprehension of the self, it misconceives the self, and then other objects like the aggregates and so forth are the objects which that misapprehension engages with and misconceives also.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and then the rest of the verse says that once one stops that, when one puts an end to that misapprehension of the self, that consciousness which misapprehends the self, then the existence or samsara will come to an end as well.
Oh, yeah. That 가야 되다 그도 시에로 다 가상 그 잠들 죽인다 오야 오 된다비다 오 거기 저와 가봐 쳐봐라 아니 다 거기 님이 시고 라 님이 시와라 다 님이도 막 쏘야 되라 야 님이 통해 아니 거기 지적이 내 쏘봐 거기 저와 메데나 거기 지적이 내 쏘봐도 갖고 와 인자 인자 치마 추비텐도 세배 래서바 가바니 들어봐
치마 추비텐도
치마 추비텐도 세배 래서바 가바니 마오와이 대통나 최대 차배 최차나 마온타니 통년나 지반 매담 지시체 가도 마오비 깨와라 아니 반주 비수서 추발라 소바기 반주 비수서비 겨우 대배 아니 체딜라 선만 차고래서나 선만 차고서나 추발라 소요 마음이 겨우 통네 와 지발라 소요 최대지 차배서나 어디 차바디기 겨우 아니 가르러서나 대대대수도와 마음바이 대통나 세대 추발라서 마음바기 대부통네 진발라서위 아니 최대지 차배서나 최대 차배 최차나 차바디 대부 가서래 난저 도만 용거와 차바디 마음의 대비 타 난로니 통화는 지기네 통화 주나 아니 가서랑 완전히 통화 주나 지반 매담 차바 지시 체대 아니 안로다 철라스 버미샤고 세다 가이 야나 될 주다.
So then if one wants to get rid of stop samsara, one necessarily has to eliminate that misapprehension of the self, which is the root of it. But in order to do that, one first has to diminish and remove the grosser forms of the mental afflictions. because these gross forms of the mental afflictions, desire, hatred, strong attachment, and so forth, they produce the karma, which causes us to be totally enveloped in samsara. So the text then introduces the way in which we get rid of grosser forms of the mental afflictions first, and then introduces the method for eliminating the misapprehension of the self, a subtler form of mental affliction. So this it leads us into the next topic within this text, which shows a rejection of the idea that it's appropriate to accumulate karma out of desire for the sake of becoming rich in the next life. And that's in verse 172. One might say, one should do meritorious actions since one wants their effects, such as wealth, in future lives. And the reply to that is, with a view to future effects, you grasp at dharma, practices, she's translating it as practices, out of greed. When you see the future outcome, why are you not afraid? So if, on realizing that there will be future effects such as wealth, one grasps at practices or dharmas like giving out of greed and attachment, one will have to experience many bad rebirths as a result of that attachment. When you see that the future outcome of such attachment is a bad rebirth, aren't you afraid?
Oh yeah. 차별 꾸나랑데 아니 체디 진바다와라 소와 대단 안지 주만도 로야메 바이자 차별 지신 안로다 쳐라 세바르 메샤고 대나 미겨왜 동아집에 내 녀나시레세 동아집에 참 랑도지네라 미가바기 랑라 동아집에 내데 녀나시 체니 단다양 차라 처망 나소도 제제기 아니 제비게와 샤바기 두 아니 세디 세바꾸나라세 아니 지소라 주바테양 안테나시레.
So then, so it says here, what is the use of attachment? Just as you do not grasp at rebirth, bad rebirth, you're not attached to getting a bad rebirth, do not grasp at, it says practices, worldly practices like, or generosity and so forth out of a wish, out of attachment to the wealth that will come as a karmic result of that. You shouldn't do that either. So here, when we think we're engaging in generosity, but if we're doing it with a motivation of wishing we're creating some positive karma and thinking, oh, I'll be rich in my next life, then that sort of practice is actually is inappropriate, because even though you're producing the result, you're producing the cause of a higher rebirth, you're still perpetuating the overall process of samsara by enmeshing yourself in a state of rebirth, which will inevitably end in death and then falling into a lower realm of existence eventually.
Oh yeah, that tendency Chinese. That's so not my imbam. Miguel Wache. So not my imbe. Ani Miguel Villa soba kapani. Lavata be sonamni. Namgun tempa tanzun churu. Kanda gawang mideba. Teda Miguel chita chas. Tala tendo. La tendo le cheba. Ani le cheba de la. Ani la. 레샤바가 라와타비 소남니 나마군도 안에 참바당 충과 주도 오외 아니 텐다와 되게 소남지 많이 빌려야지 캐외 세배꾼나 란데 아니 소남지 레자 미샤고스 세배 소남민 빌려 마차 소남지 레자 미샤고 제가 라와타비 선배니 소남니 남그 참바 당중 추루 스체 캐와 칸다 코윈 주도네 스바지위 겨와양 랑도진네라 캐와 칸다 코윈 주도네 스바지위 겨와양 스바지위 겨와양 미드바타 스바지위 겨와양 미드바타 미게와 소나 마임빌레 시더체데 남바 탐제도 방와차오.
Then the next verse shows rejection of the idea that one ought to accumulate non-virtuous karma, and that's given in verse 173. So merit is in every way just like a wage for a wage earner. How could those who do not want even virtue do what is non-virtuous? Just like a wage earned by a worker, merit will come to resemble a payment. Therefore, the wise do not do even meritorious actions motivated by attachment. Here, wise person, intelligent or wise person refers to someone who understands that which is to be taken up, practiced, and that which is to be avoided or gotten rid of. When the wise do not want even the virtue that produces worldly existence because of seeing it as a cause for the samsara, cycle of rebirths, how could they do meritorious actions which are non-virtuous? They always avoid them.
Oh yeah, that is bena ranga de ranga kamro ranga sasa yu kamro chi sewa na ane jabur nyungwa newa anti se so she kuwa tawa shindo.
The example that's given for that, or analogy, is a dog ate a beggar named Rangata, and the dog ate his food, but Rangata accused a prince who was fasting nearby of having eaten it.
Oh yeah, that dungangosu jeje lepang batela, rwa lepang bi gowa tan batela. Oh, sorry. Nelu dobi kewa nam sipa bana taban drowa tang. Kewa nam ji tori la yang sipa gawa misem na, sita kasang tensowa, kewa nam tori misem na, jowa dan jesu bi na gawa misipa wo. 다 담보 되라 내려도 비 개와나 사바바나 타반 drowa 되라 강기 drowa 추고지 소자 주미 기우 따른 통한 주와 대다치 사와 공반 담바줘 세대다 대세송도와 지와나 코알랑 가와 세지 근데 라시면 방고선도 돼 개와 관계 아니 다 가르소래 무슨 또 개와 관계 친한 게 좋아 신의 주비 개와당 비매지 넘버 나위 수고지 천 가다 다出国지 초자와然出国扩了那些钱呢是吧让新们把来到你们个出国让新就扩那见到居然见了在那扩完那些钱呢我2年就往个按照扩送给事平没人看个这话出国去错着有没有带着些个了反正那么那有出国去错着我大家我让新去吃饭当然아니 라신지 추와 나와 유미 교우다 통화주와 대다 아니 코알라 가네 치사와를 아니 고만다 바타바다 탐제 켐발라 도르 주베 아니 나루 지텐선 발라 가와 차오 스톤 주와 대다지 사와 고만 탐바조 세팀벌
The next topic is demonstration of why one needs to get rid of karma, one needs to abandon it. Here, karma, again, of course, is the source of samsara, the virtuous and non-virtuous, unwavering karma. All three of those are sources of samsaric existence. And this has two subdivisions. First is that those who are wise or skilled in their understanding of the way things are go to liberation by getting rid of their attachment or craving. And the second point is that these wise persons, if they don't even consider rebirth in the upper realms of existence to be desirable and don't take delight in it, rebirth in the upper realms out of attachment, then of course it's impossible for them to have any joy or delight in states of existence which are suitable for misery and disgust. So the first of these, that the way in which the wise people who understand the way things are go to liberation by getting rid of their attachment is expressed in verse 174. And that says, whoever sees, here it says phenomena, but the text actually says the world as like a collection of mechanical devices or machines. The text, whoever sees the world, world here actually is a term including both the environment, but specifically the beings that inhabit the world of sentient beings, as being like a collection, a mass of contraptions, and like illusory beings, most clearly reaches the excellent state. So the commentary here on this says that foolish or childish beings take delight in samsara, but those who are wise and to directly perceive and see that dependent originations are devoid of intrinsic existence, they they observe that these internal and external aspects of the world, the external world as well as the internal parts of it, meaning the beings that inhabit it, are like, they appear similar to a mass of machines which, although they appear like in the case of the beings that inhabit the world, they appear to these beings who understand the way things actually are as like men and women, mechanical machines that have been made out of wood, appearing like men and women. And they understand that although they're empty of being established by means of their own intrinsic nature, they appear to ordinary people as if they were established by their own intrinsic nature. And so that being the case, these wise people see all the people in the world as like illusory persons, and in that way, those wise persons are able to completely go beyond samsara, and having gone beyond samsara, they're able to to arrive at the state of omniscience, the state of most noble form of liberation and omniscience. And that being the case, one ought to make train oneself in understanding the meaning of the way things are. You can also, the example here that's given is like, is given in later here, but there's another, you can draw the example from the verse in the introduction to the middle way, where it says that first we think I, at the beginning we think I, and then we think mine, and out of that misconception of I and mine, then the samsara revolves like a irrigation wheel. It's like a bunch of buckets on a rope that go down into a well and are drawn up to water crops and such, that kind of contraption. So samsara is like that. We go up and down with it like that water wheel.
Oh yeah. 난 배나出国看지出国지 범위 아니 리모看我在我前完呐第리모出国看了 아니 리모 出国看了 The
example that's given in Chandrakirti's commentary, Master Chandrakirti's commentary here is, it's like the case of a mechanic or somebody who was skilled in manufacturing devices, who shamed a painter by means of a mechanical. Created a mechanical woman, but the painter returned the favor to him, caused suffering for him by making a painting.
Oh yeah, that didn't. Kawana Turilaya, Sebe, God of Missenba, Jordan, Jesus to be now God of Missenba, Star Kawana, Ani Turi, Sami Pinzolaya, Ani Casanawa Tumba, Ani Jiji, Casan Taswa, or Kawana. 토리장야와 탄중 지지 줄 세카사다 태소와 어디 카와나라 토리라 세발라 가라 메셈나 아니 저와다 지수 투비 내가 가와 아니 미스바니 간다라니 코와나 개와 간다라니 코와라 유남지장가 메나 유남지장가 메나 대달라디 남군도 가와 태바 많이 어디다 간다라니 세가 내루지 퇴라 개와 간다라니 코와나 가와다 아니 가와 저와다 지수 투비 유남지장 같이 쓰바 매바 대다당 대다 쪼와다 지수 튠비 쪼와당 가와서 지나라야 가와 여바 치다리 주디 주고 말해.
So the next point is that these wise persons, if they don't consider even the delights of the upper realms of existence, the heavens and the human realm, to be delightful, they don't take any joy in those things out of attachment, then of course it's impossible for them to take delight in places of existence which are suitable for disgust and aversion, and that's given in verse 175. For those who do not enjoy any objects in samsara, it is altogether impossible for them to take pleasure in this world. When those who are wise with regard to the way things are, it says here meaning of reality, which is okay, the way things are, do not enjoy or crave even those objects in samsara, which are normally or ordinary people consider enjoyable. How could they enjoy the source of birth, aging, and so forth, which ought to cause aversion, which typically would cause aversion? Thus, for them, there is never any joy out of attachment to samsara. Thus, the last line of the commentary there says that thus these persons, that is wise and intelligent persons, it's inappropriate or for them to take delight in samsara out of attachment. And you have to qualify that. They don't take any delight in the world out of their attachment or their craving for samsaric pleasure.
Oh yeah. That is better lah. 不系创建度联动全部考虑机会加速了两万。这么这里系统帮呢，我3点是接不行了，我是一个啦是，他3点钟我是接不行了。
The example that's given in this context is there was in Kushinagar. Kushinagar, there was one who named Mahasudarshana, and he gave up his 84,000 queens because he saw the false. This reads differently in this text. There was a king in Kushinagar named Mahasudarshana, and he enjoyed having the status of a universal emperor, but he gave up 84,000 his harem of 84,000 queens, and in order to give rise to the 4 states of mental concentration, especially the 4th dhyana, 4th mental concentration.
Oh yeah. 他军政天那空都下巴，天那军政天那我的下巴他苏着了所谓等个。 아니 요즘 예미 된데 봐 샤바나 세상에 삼네 아니 예미 동안 대다 몇대나 아니 동아지 주방고 동아기 주방마라 아니 레루 동바지 때나 바고 봐 인상 어때 봐 나를 샤바다 수라라 소요 요즘 예미 삼다 레루지 때나 켜라 차대 아니 치디셔 봐 삼자 탐자 그 텐도 나나 봐야 다 자주 줘봐라 좀 봐 차고래
So the conclusion of all of this is, as it's previously been explained, one ought to, by having considered carefully the negative consequences, the defects of these objects, visible forms, sounds, etc., these sense objects, and here especially out of having attachment to them, and then the karma that one produces out of that attachment to sense objects, and then all of the suffering that arises out of that, thinking of all the defects of samsaric suffering arising out of our attachment and craving for sensual experience, then we should become wise in the meaning of reality, or the way things are. And having done that, then we should exert ourselves to achieve unexcelled awakening. Here we have to, unexcelled awakening requires that one does that for the sake of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, that nirmeba mida dunga lebar samchane dunga jaso tinda mebejo suso yula seba namba de lame chanju rula zamba cha sa dal geji lenyin geji mida badang 아니 레왕지 레니지 샤왕도 주비 아니 풍보 동아 레버 삼바 차네 풍보디 레 친자라 아니다 동아지 레바 동아지 가서를 밑마대바 인다 동아대비 이미테다 레버 삼바 차네 아니 코 동아지 자서 전부 띵다 띵다 탐명을 봐그 아니 거기 자서 되게 주 아니 무엇이 제제대 아니 가르쳐 세바인 바래 라 미시시비 주야 마시시바 예바네 소나시 남제라 미시시비 주야 마시시바 제바네 아이 그때마다도 코아제와 진가데 세바 라 미시와데 아니 코아제지 그 주인장 아니 코아제지 그 주인하나 말이바 마저바 시바 주고바데 가르쳐는 무엇이 제바 주제대 아니 세바라와 저와 두시죠. 저한테 나시 되게 순고임지. 미시시피 주야 마시셔바니 주니 편바 차제지 테마다지 내자인 전에 오다 남절에 소바 나시 전에 동아 자주 뛴다 매비주 수소유라 세바 남방데 세바 방데 아니 체두샤와 삼제지 진짜 나는 바양하다 봐서 삼제지 chanju 주비 체두 아니 진주당고 그래 다도인 바래.
So then there's a verse that summarizes the chapter by Gyaltsab Je, and he says, here I say that having properly considered impermanence and suffering, impermanence again refers to the fact that things which are produced by causes and conditions arise and disintegrate instantaneously. They arise, they endure, and they disintegrate instantaneously. And that being the case, this applies also to all of samsaric experience, pleasurable and unpleasant experience. All of it arises and disintegrates instantaneously. And then, likewise, suffering arises out of causes. Itself is impermanent. It arises and disintegrates instantaneously, and it comes out of causes that arise and disintegrate instantaneously. So both the impermanence and suffering are tied together in that way, that which suffers is impermanent and undergoes a change constantly. And so having carefully considered that, then and thinking about the cause of this ocean of samsara, which is bottomless and has no limit, as mentioned previously, the samsaric ocean of samsara is without bottom, fathomless and boundless. The cause of that, here the cause is specified as craving for objects such as visible forms, sounds, etc., the sense objects. Craving here is the proximate cause for samsara. That is, it's without craving, there's no way for karma to be germinated and activated to produce samsaric suffering. So even though it is the case actually that it's ignorance ignorance, a misunderstanding of the way things are, that is the root cause. The proximate cause for samsaric experience, suffering, is this craving for pleasurable experiences and other forms of craving. And so by getting rid of that craving, craving is the relationship between craving as the proximate cause, the cause that it sort of immediately precedes the activation of a karmic propensity to produce a suffering experience. That's specified in the Compendium of Epistemology by Dharmakirti. But the relationship between craving and ignorance, there it's called not knowing things, is specified in there as well. So once one then, having well thought about suffering, impermanence, and how the cause of this limitless and endless, fathomless ocean of samsara is craving, one should get rid of that craving and make effort to accomplish unexcelled perfect awakening for the sake of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, that is so live and our children she number shepherd. Never she when you bush a mini debut launch of a shepherd palm. Tap them around the shepherd, Dimitri, watch it. That up the shepherd Jabatella. Lam Jula giving the Druba. Nuru the Druba, Lumi Ju also Java get tap Dambala, Louis Shaba, the Tender Damba, that Louis Shaba Delaya Sumi Evana, Nemo Boni with Jinzantam. Any Nemo Bon to Java Shaba, Yasichima Yenza Javi Javala, Toma Meja, Sabata, you prepare Damba, what the Kasasha said. That Tambo, Nemo Bon with Jinzala, you've been an orgy tender, Nemo Bondu with Jinza, you've been Tambo, orgy turned in butter. 是吧？当我就听在了，原在你那边那呢，其他没得没了，那早晚有人没来吧？提醒过了，捐些吧，等下有人没来说，这个他得说说，他们没把那宽比等下去青蛙其他帮些那啥，他当做他们没把那等下个青蛙一啥，等到有等下个青蛙的其他帮些那啥。 其他媒体性，安尼咱大家看说嘞，媒体性，咱有闽南啦，恰别过来那位，咱话有人都闽南话提醒都是，反正老没对吧，大学没对吧，是吧？其他媒体都媒体性，安尼咱有闽南啦，恰别过来那位，咱话有人都闽南话提醒都是。 对，其他没得没拿了，早晚有人没拿吧，是吧？提醒到那就话，其他个我啦，没得把他们这边给捐写完了，其他那边我看他们家，俺那看说的，东亚这些个猪，东亚猪，这些个猪应把写完给过了没得把他们写为捐写完了，底下有人都没来说，来把单了，早晚没得别帮你说是，俺早晚的，俺那好底下给早晚，男生马上把这说天上担保，因为咱们有把衣裳，俺就帮你说是啊。
So I'm not going to translate the title. That's the title of the chapter, which was given at the very end there. It's written in the translation. Next comes the 8th prakarana, or exposition of the 400. And here this has multiple subdivisions as well. The basic subject here is given in the first outline subject. It's fourth in one of the overall outlines. And it shows an exposition of the method for how to prepare someone who is a student, a proper disciple, who is a proper vessel for giving rise within their mental continuum to this path of understanding reality. And so the basic subject here is an exposition of the method for purifying the continuum, the mental mind stream of the disciple. That has subdivisions too, the exposition of the text itself, and then the title of the text is given then at the end. First comes the explanation of the body of the text of the chapter, and that has 3 subdivisions. The reasons why one is able to get rid of the mental afflictions. Second, a more extensive explanation of the way in which one gets rid of the mental afflictions, and then showing, giving examples of how that even though rebirth for a person 양시 지말 닝창 주의 키워라 삽제라 양시 지말 닝창 주의 키워라 그러면서
지난 거 거는 제셔 예를도 레바타나 아니 가서는 레바타나 짜와 밑에 본 리소스.
I'll skip over the rest of the outline which comes later as we go through the text. So first, the reasons why we're able to get rid of the mental afflictions. There's the actual subject, and then the exposition of the way in which the mental afflictions are suitable to suitable to be eliminated. First is the main subject here, actual subject. It's in verse 176. Question, how do we escape from the bondage of desire to which we have been accustomed since beginningless time? And so the example it's given here in the verse 176, just as friendship between people who disagree does not last long, desire does not last long when all things false are recognized. Friendship motivated by desire between people who are not amicable and who disagree does not last long. Similarly, desire does not last long for an adept who recognizes the faults in all external and internal things, and which give rise to many unwanted, undesirable consequences or outcomes. When properly investigated, its root is found to be unstable, and thus one can get rid of it. Here, when it says properly investigated, meaning this refers to the ignorance which misapprehends the nature of things is the root, and because that root is unstable, because it's contrary to fact, it's not the way things are, thus it's unstable and can be eliminated. No.
Oh yeah. Bena 잠시 주셔샤와 방말렘비 뒤에서 신임이 라바는 진더발라 덤베 잠시 추 레나 칭 라바는 레나 칭 자나 남바 초로 예수배 퇴네 아니 밥이 담바시라 따베 다시 도만하시래.
Example that's given for that, there was a Brahman, and she gives the Gyu uses the Tibetan, but probably it was something like Hetu, a Brahmin called Hetu. He was getting married. He wanted to hold his young bride's hand. The teacher, that is the Buddha, said, "O Brahmin boy, relationship is bondage, separation is freedom." Hearing this, Hetu analyzed or understood the 4 Arya realities, 4 noble truths, and through which he became an arhat.
Oh yeah, that didn't. You mo bandu ruwi ta chu dan ba tela. You mo kala mi bi sing wa me ba bandu ruwa. You mo ji ju dan ba me ba. You mo bong mi ni we ju che ga ba. You mo ma bang ba tu ma tong wa ga wa me ba wo. Sta de che ga la tang bo de la. Dan you mo kala mi bi sing wa me ba bandu ruwa tela. 信仰帮助中啊，太拉现在大概的生活的是呢，拉拉天你拉下亲是拉拉，安尼有西德拉安尼下巴结吧，拉拉西德拉当，拉拉天你拉当心是，拉拉天你拉没把推起的吧，推没把我些，安尼有几年吧，同样帮你吧，马上西德吧没把个，安尼看是帮你个是。 那有的年娃通话，帮你话买了年娃通话，现在年娃没得把银张，俺那年娃的，俺那没把手机给年把了转把钱把银张，俺那年娃有的年娃通话帮你把马赛，俺那做的看着来是那年娃的，俺那让刚说的西的让心了马修吧。 시대 랑신라 예와 슈바이나 아니 예와의 자원의 방면도 바인자 예와 덴바 메바인 덴바와 메바인자 랑신라 아니 예와 슈메 바인 메바인자 아니 방이 그래 대소와라 덴바 메비시 방뉘데 대자니 차징어와라 라라데 줄라스 대자 제와라 유차지 강라 차차가 유데면나 아니 대자 메제 바이장 대자니 차지 위라 유중어와라 라라라 줄라스 대야 자 유 강라 제지 유 대야 대자 대야 아랑고 원이지 추와 메비세르스 대자들 심지라신라 마슈바이장 심지 대자의 차와 용고와이장 대야 랑고 원이지 추와 메데 랑고 원이지 추와 유나 아니 차바께서 그 유들라 가두이나야 차대내 거와다 아니 세당 제사가 유들라 가두이나야 아니 세당고 내와 거와라 된다 마인바 아 차바께서 유들라 가시 가서 뒤넘시 그때 차바장 뒤넘시 그때 세당 뒤넘시 그때 말을 받죠 여와서送过 봐然后 라라 테니라 다세리 라라 유 테니라 차대내라 야라 유 테니라 당신 라라 테니라 뭔가 기르세요 인자 차지 강나 차바체 유대 랑신이 마주바 인자 아니 뒤에 랑신이 주면 뒤에 따데 테라 차바체 아마도 아니 당와당 아니 뭔가 미지와送过来是吧
So next comes an exposition of the way the mental afflictions we're able to get rid of them. They're suitable to be abandoned or gotten rid of. And then within that two topics or four topics. The first here is that they're suitable to be gotten rid of because the base which is observed and gives rise to the mental afflictions is not fixed as being. We'll see what that means in a minute, but it's not fixed, and. So that's the first topic here. The rest of them will come in sequence. That the cause which gives, the second one is the cause which gives rise to the mental afflictions is unreal. And then rejection of any kind of attempt to prove that the mental afflictions cannot be gotten rid of. And then fourth comes that there's no contradiction in what has been said in the fact that we observe lots of people who have not gotten rid of the mental afflictions. So the first topic here is that the mental afflictions are suitable to be gotten rid of because the basis, things which we observe and then which give rise to our mental afflictions are not fixed in any specific form. And that's given in verse 177. And I'm going to just translate this. So by seeing the faults of the objects, it's not only the case that one can get rid of the mental afflictions, but one's able to get rid of the mental afflictions as well by seeing that the bases upon which the mental afflictions arise are unreal. So we've observed that attachment arises or operates in dependence upon a thing which is the object of our desire. And however, that's not established by means of its own character. The thing being a desirable object, its desirability is not established by its own character. And so the verse here, this is verse 177, says, some are attached to something. Some are averse to it. Some feel confusion with respect to it. Thus, desire has no object is a literal way to translate that, or desire is meaningless. You could also translate that. So here, some objects objects that serve as the basis for our attachment, our anger, attraction, aversion, attachment, anger, and confusion are not fixed in any particular form by means of their own intrinsic character or own intrinsic nature. The objects themselves don't possess that intrinsic nature or intrinsic character of being desirable or object of aversion, anger, and so forth, or objects of confusion. Because we see, for some objects, some people have, towards a particular object, a single object, they develop strong attachment. And some people develop anger towards the same object. And then some people, at times, develop confusion with respect to the same object. And in fact, we can see these things simultaneously or sequentially. The single object can give rise to desire, hatred, ignorance from different people at the same time, or a single object can be something that we can have attachment to at one time, anger towards another, and confusion towards at another time. So, that being the case, if objects of our, say for example, our attachment were established as objects of attachment by means of their own intrinsic nature, then it would be the case that we would always and only develop attachment towards those objects. And that would be proper, actually, because the objects would have as their intrinsic character or nature desirability or being attractive. But that's not the case. Objects are not fixed in that way. They're not determined in that form, and that's the case.
Oh, yeah. 차제유 원이지 줍나스. 강라 차바제사가 유동 원이 좀 랑신지 줍나. 아니 디니라 차바 바시제를 발라. 아니 차바제와 차유대 텔라 차바제와 강라야 마랑 말해봐. 강라야 마대봐 차바제고와 인장. 아니 디니라 차바 바시제를 발라. 지를 발라. 아니 차바 바시제방 내와 매배. 아니 차제유 샤베 유 가서 요 미바 탐제 또배 따와서 마도 데베트 랑은 원이지 주가 매배 아니 실했더니 장 빵이 그래 해서 고 랑기 랑신라 아니 어디 마슈바 인장 아니 실했더니 장 아니 빵이 그래.
So then, if objects of our attachment were established by their own character or by their own intrinsic nature as desirable, then it would be proper to be attached to them because they have as their intrinsic character or nature desirability or being attractive. But they're not. They don't have that kind of fixed nature. They're not determined to be desirable in that way. And that being the case, all of the objects here in general, or observed objects, the objects as they're observed by desire, hatred, confusion, and so forth, are nothing but mental constructs. Here the Tibetan is dokpe taktam. That can be translated as a thought construct. Other than that, they're not. They don't have any intrinsic character at all, but they're simply constructed or imagined to exist that way by thought. So thought constructs, and thus because the objects of our desire are not established by means of their own intrinsic nature. That is, desire takes as its object an object that it considers to be intrinsically desirable, but these objects don't exist that way. They're not established by means of their own intrinsic nature as desirable. Then, that being the case, then we're able to get rid of desire from the perspective of the basis of the desire as well. That is, the basis here is in reference to the objects that give rise to desire. the object itself is considered desirable not intrinsically, but simply depending upon desire, projecting onto it that kind of desirable character.
Oh yeah. That when I do Gashila, Chuma Ni Yela, Chuma Jig Martin, Rang Pomotonga, Gala. And Chuma Thomas, that Chuma Thomas, Dungawatang. Tramo Pamania was Tramo de Pamania was, you know.
Example it's given for this is a man had two wives. When one who was a mother saw her own daughter, she felt happy. When the younger wife, who had no children, saw the daughter, she suffered. But the servant, their servant, was indifferent towards the daughter.
Oh yeah, that didn't match. You want to do them by me, that they said you can. And it's short on the top of the master go at it. Top of me, but there's a lot. So that you mean, the Carasana Sidana go over country, Yenayang, and the round dodgy top of Meba, and the Dejala Sova Yaba Mina. Around dodgy top of me, but Dejala Sova Minas. Yanda turned out top by she, and it constantly. Lord and them was such a Yanta, Yanda was a concert, Rashi Chua. Tapa, my button, Rashi Chua, to go to and that turned out Tobashi, Toba Tasan, and that turned out Tobashi, Lord and them was sushi tea. Miba maybe didn't born you a massa. Do them maybe Guanajang and Bang, Miba Demba maybe, or Dinzingi, Miu, Kang, and Demba Zembazian, Miu de, and Demba Meba Massa. Boniva Massa, T. Do, Demba, maybe Conaja Boni, say Kanye Chana, Demba Meba Yenza, and she did Ranshila, Mashuba is that this one Boni. There's a Shetan Demboni, $2 Jongasum. Oh, there's a Shaman, Chetan that Dumude. Ani rang Zanji, and it's me, you can not talk $2 Jongasum. Oh, Jongasum, say Shabata, Sushi may be easy to Tobatam. Tadala do the Tawatar, and the Toba Tawa Mebar, Toba Mebar. There's other so you couldn't know more about Nam, Yabani, Yabamina. Teda, Yabala Dena Yabakwana, Masaji, Arangon Wunji, Mare said, Yanda turned down, said to a maybe Yanda to be turned down, Gawa Gaves, Yanda to what it turned up to what a Gave, turned down Gawa, Toba Tawashi, Lord and Taba Sushi, Toba Tawata, Wunji to a Gavishiro.
So the next point is that showing that the causes that give rise to the mental afflictions are unreal, and that's given in verse 178. I'm just going to translate this freely and not follow the translation here. And so it says that without thought, desire, etc., don't exist. That being so, who that has a mind, who that's intelligent, would apprehend both a real thing, a real object, and thought. Is a kind of loose translation of verse 178. And so not only is it the case that one is able to get rid of the mental afflictions, abandon them, because they're the objects of the mental afflictions, the observed objects are unreal. Here this is saying that, the objects themselves don't possess any kind of intrinsic nature or intrinsic existence. They don't have a character which is intrinsically desirable or so forth. They don't possess any kind kind of intrinsic character like that. So not only that, one is able to get rid of the mental afflictions via understanding that their causes are unreal as well. And here, 2 lines from the basic verses on wisdom are cited, where Master Nagarjuna says that it is taught, meaning the Buddha taught, that desire, anger, and confusion arise from ideas. They arise from ideas. And so that's cited also in Chandrakirti's commentary here. And so the explanation of that is Okay, so here, just like a snake is imagined upon a rope, just like a snake is imagined on a rope, this occurs due to an idea which is an erroneous judgment, a mistaken kind of judgment. And based upon that erroneous judgment, mistaken judgment, one imagines that a coiled up rope, or a striped rope here it says, is a snake. Similarly, without something being mentally constructed or a thought construct, then the mental afflictions, all of the forms of mental affliction, such as desire, etc., don't exist at all. They can't exist without this thought construction, mental construction. And therefore, their existence, the existence of the mental afflictions, is nothing but contingent. It's contingent strictly upon that thought construction, the process of constructing, imagining things to be some way that they're not. But they don't exist by means of their own intrinsic character in any way whatsoever. And because it's the case that if something was established by means of its own intrinsic nature or its own character, then that would contradict it being a real thing. Therefore, that being the case, those two being contradictory, something being real, an actual real thing, and something being established by means of its own intrinsic nature or own character, then who that has a mind would hold onto something which is just a thought construct, mental construct, imagined by thought is another way you could translate that. Because something being mentally constructed and it being established by means of its own intrinsic character or its own intrinsic character is contradictory.
그래서 오야 대인자 나디 가르소래서나 또바 매번 되자라 소라 연이미비세 그라 시제비 되와 코란디 다와자비 되와 될때 용어에서서 또바 여바 코네 여바 녀당 또바 매번이 대단히 코르마자와 타발라 두르 따와시노 치당 난기 쳐 가르지 이나야 랑 도시지 또바 예배 아니 여바 코나당 또바 여바 코네 여바 녀당 또바 매배랑 도시지 또바 매번이 대단히 또바 매번이 코르마자와 타발라 두르 따와신 이제 가라 아니 가지 타발라 두르 따와신 이제 가라 소하나 시체니 다 치다나 그오 탐제 아니 또배 따와인바 또배 따바 정인바
So this is expressed not in la genyankasunanti nyamasu.
또바 여바 코네 여바 니당 또바 매번이 대단히 코르마자와 타발라 두르 따와다 라는 거에 가서 마주방에서 저와 그래서나 친당한 그거 간듯이 이나야 랑 도저 그 또바 예배 여바 코나다 또바 여바 코네 여바당 아니 랑 도저 그 또바 매배 아니 매바 대단히 아니 코르마자바 타발라 두르 따와다 또 타바 도저히 또바티 따주탕 안에 타들라 주주 따와 나시마도 랑 모여 주어지와 말이.
So the example is also given elsewhere in Master Chandrakirti's works, discussing this process of imagining a snake on a rope. Somebody who sees a rope but thinks it's a snake, they imagine that rope is an actual snake. And without that process of imagination or thought construction here, the production of the idea that thing is a snake, there's no way that thought that it is a snake would arise. The identification of it as a snake, it doesn't occur. So that's strictly the result of the person's own mental construction. They create that notion snake and then apply it to the rope. So the same thing occurs with ordinary people when we misconceive, when we perceive internal and external things. We conceive the way they're produced is actually through a process of thought construction or imagination, one can say. That is, the objects don't exist intrinsically from their own side or objectively. Rather, they're fabricated mentally by a process of thought construction. And the way in which the things actually exist is not that they possess that character which we construct mentally and apply to them, but rather they exist devoid of any kind of intrinsic nature whatsoever.
Oh yeah, then the inza ane chida na ge che tamje ane toba tawa yimbade kasare ane wa ko ji shi do yi ga so na zo yi ga me do ka ja se ji kan zo ba wa yong ba ane tela chibo ga ya me ta toba wang ge sha ba yin se te ge ane ta 균전 지 lumon de ji zu guo de wa o na zo yi ga lai ne ge na zo yi ga me do ka cha wa la so ane se ji kan ba yi do wa la so wa din do kan den je kan za men ge ba da ba za ma do me ba tena men ge da ba za ma do gu jian xian che ba wo gan ya ma de se da dan da de long de wa na la sha cha na xie ri ba chu ju wei 아니 주바 주지가를 지대 말이 젠젠도 간지 조비 상제소 대치나 지대디 남도 이시 진미대 세월마 찬도와 어딘소 어지대 말이 젠진도 세대 니지지 지대대다 말이 비젠젠 말이 비젠젠데 말이 비제부 봐 말이 비제부 말이 비제부 인장 아니 가서를 말이 비대부 인상 이 말이 지대 말이 전제도 간지 좀 자유되고 인바데 좀 된대지 송바레세 균전 티시나 아니 니지 지된 대다 민게 따바자 마도 아니 라와도 요 말이 세제 간지 좀이 산제송 티시나 지된디 남도 이시치 미대 세다디 말이
So this way in which the world is constructed out of thought is explained, as it was explained, the process of thought construction or fabrication, mental fabrication, in which a person misconstrues a rope as a snake, and the way in which the idea of snake is developed, produced based upon the observation of the snake, and the process of the way in which we fabricate our ideas about the world and then apply them to the things that exist in the world, internal and external phenomena. The process of mental fabrication or thought construction is the same in both cases, although there's a difference in terms of the validity of the first case is not valid and the second is. However, this is explained, a way to illustrate this as well, or a scriptural basis for this is found in the question of Upali, the sutra which was requested by Upali, and there it says that it's describing a sort of divine paradisical realm in which there are beautiful mansions and divine flowers and so forth. And Lord Buddha, in describing this, says that these mansions that we can observe and the flowers that are blooming, all of this is simply established by the force of thought. It's merely established by the force of thought. The same idea is expressed likewise in La So it's merely mentally constructed or fabricated by mental activity. And this is explained likewise in the citation from the 60 verses on reasoning that's given right after this here in this context, as far as the way in which one explains the root text as well as the commentary here. One follows the explanation in the 60 verses, where it says, this world arises from the condition of ignorance, and the Buddhists have taught it that way. And that being the case, who would not accept that this world is thought? Who would say that's not acceptable or demonstrable?
Oh, the Inzang, that kind of so is an Rijetin Gasto. Jews I mean Chumayi, Mimi Lumi Nangami, Namshia Mayu Guimana, Teleshani, Jew Kang, Sigala, Jiwom Kansa, said the Kanda Koyo, Sena. Ani, that you Kaso the Dashi de la, come to Pumbonga. Come to Gunane, Asada, Chuda, Meda, Nunda, Nanga, Come Ganga, and it you Mayimba. Right, you will send me to me, Mimi Lumi, Nanga means. Namshe Mayins. Good Mena, Sena, come to Toba Tiang, you Mayins. So I come to Toba, you Mayin. Down when a Jew Kawayo, Sena, you say Gana, I know come to Toba, let them Tabatam. Tabatam to your days. Or dig better than the deal at la. Ani Tata do the tower that do some good. So, remember to say Bobby Gasso, Chilu Drudan Drashing. So, Ani Tata do Tabi anything to Tataki and Chasha Gayang, Druji Sensi Medan. And the Tata Dulunabi, and Tata Junzi Logia Watena Shinchani. Or Tati thing to do Chasha Kalaya Tata do Major, Tata Junzi Logia Watching. Tena Shinchani or Pumbonga Tobam, Pumbonga Ram, Yana come to Tobam, come to Reri with Tindu, Ani Kasa Sitana Major. Sobanya Kansa Mejang, Ani Tabatsamiba, Tachibashibare.
So then, here another verse that one could cite to illustrate this is like the verse in the Precious Garland, where Master Nagarjuna says that that the person is not earth, is not water, is not fire, is not wind, is not space, is not consciousness, and since the person is also not the collection of these, then the person is the implication there being that the person is merely a nominal designation that's applied to a basis of designation. That is, the person or I or self is not something that exists as the collection of one could say the 6 elements: earth, water, fire, wind, space, and consciousness, or the 5 aggregates, the physical form, form and so forth. Those 5 aggregates or the 6 elements, either individually or collectively, are not the person. Likewise, the person is not findable in any way whatsoever within the aggregates or the collection of elements, but is rather something which is applied, is an identity which is applied to the collection of the aggregates as a basis for that designation. And the process of sort of mentally constructing the person or designating the person based upon a valid basis of designation is exactly the same as the process of imagining a snake on a rope. With this, the text here says that when one is imagining a snake on a rope, the parts of the rope, the whole rope itself, the continuity of the rope, the whole string of the rope, the segments of the rope, none of them are suitable to serve to illustrate as an example of a snake. That is, so what we do is we just imagine that there is a snake there and impose that upon that rope in its totality, but the snake doesn't exist within the rope in parts or whole or in any way whatsoever. And then similarly, when we talk about a person or an I or self, these things as well, person, I, self, are not the collection of the aggregates. They're not the individual aggregates themselves, the parts of the collection. They're not the stream of the aggregates or some particular moment or instance of the continuity of the aggregates. None of these parts or wholes are suitable as an illustration, or they're not an example of a person. Rather, the person is a dependent designation, is something which is dependently designated upon the collection of the aggregates. When we observe the aggregates or even some part of the aggregates, we think I or mine or self, but it's the process of ascription of self or I or person to the aggregates is identical with the process of imagining a snake on a rope, but the big difference being, of course, that a collection of the aggregates is a valid basis for the thought I or self, and I and self actually exist, whereas rope is not a valid basis for designating or imagining a snake. There's never a snake in a rope, so that's a huge difference. But as far as they're being dependently designated and thought constructs, they're identical in that respect. And here then it says that one should understand that because things are dependently designated, all phenomena, internal and external phenomena, all phenomena should be understood in that way.
Oh yeah, that in the Shuan China, Castle, Pumbo, any Pumbo Tobam, come to Tobala Dane, Casa, Tabadang. Any Tatala do the Taba new day, and make a Tabatami by Chupache. Kala, and the Tasak, Shite, Dinduya, Shite and Matuba, and Chupa Imba. Castle, Chico, Dera, the Tayan, that Tatala do the Tabi, and Tati Dindu, do Tawana Matu. Tatala Dunzi, Lojana, Dunzi, Loja, Tati Dindu, do Meva, do Meva Chibarava. That then I say, Jenny, come to Duam, and a Pumbo Topi Dindu, and a Casa Meva Chibache. That Tatala do the Tawa Zamdu, and the Tata and do to good advice, and Tatala do the Tawa Zamdu do Machum. Dashik Pungso getting Pumbo Topi Dindu. Ani Casore, Casa Tabatam to grace, that doesn't worry. Pumbo Tobit into Casa to good Vasana, and you to your money. Pumbo Tobit into Casa Yoa de Vasana, Mayor. Pumbo Tobit into Casa Yoina, Pumbo Tobit into Casa Yogore. And your Casa Tanya, the Tatan Sayus and Yogore, Rangan and Tugore. 是吧？풍부 초비된도 가사 많이. 풍부 초비된도 가사 많이 장 가사 풍부 초비된도 가사대 명기 샤점다 다점도 냐버래. 아니 타지 된도 주 많이 봐 마세 주 또부 다점점 주 안에 명기 다점도야 많이 봐 배대면서 조심 봐다.
So there's a huge difference that we have to very carefully understand between the identification of a snake, identification of a rope as a snake, and the identification of the aggregates as being a basis for identifying a person. The two cases are similar in certain respects, but extremely different, totally different in one crucial respect. When we observe a coiled up rope and we think snake, and we maybe even give it the name snake, we ascribe the name identity snake to that coiled up rope. The process of mental construction here, we're fabricating an idea and utilizing a term or name to call that thing something. The process of mental fabrication is exactly the same as when we observe the collection of the aggregates and we produce the notion I or self or person, and then we ascribe that identity to that collection of aggregates. So the process of mental construction, the process of giving an identity to the thing, calling it a name, those two are exactly the same. However, the huge difference is that a coiled up rope is not a snake in any way whatsoever. It's not the case that we ever can validly identify a coiled up rope as a snake. Whereas the collection of the aggregates, they do serve as a valid base for the production of the idea of person, the idea self, as well as the ascription of the name person or I or self, that can be validly done. So that's a huge difference. But returning then, if we actually examine, if we look for a snake within a rope, either the collection, the coiled up rope as a totality or the individual parts of the rope, we don't find a snake within it. And similarly, when we look for a person, an I, or a self within the aggregates as a collection, it's not findable. The person, I, self is never findable within the collection of the aggregates, which serves as the basis for that designation. So the unfindability of a snake in a rope and the unfindability of an I or a person or a self within the basis of designation, the collection of the aggregates, is the same, but the identification or designation of a rope as a snake is invalid. It's invalidated, whereas the identification of the collection of the aggregates as a basis for the ascription of the notion I or self or person is valid and is demonstrable.
아니 탄협이 참여 주바 전단제 탄협이 참여 민여바 아니 전단제에 참여 민여바 인자 어다 대들라 아세 아니 샤도야 되임바데.
So when we say I or we think I exist, I am, that's occurring through, we observe the collection of our aggregates, and then we form the notion I, and then we ascribe that identity, or we use the convention I, and ascribe that to the basis of designation there, the collection of the aggregates. That process of ascribing an identity is valid. We can establish that because that use of the thought I, the use of the term I, as a designation for the collection of the aggregates, or based upon that. Again, you have to return here, the I or the self or the person is not findable within the basis of designation, the collection of the aggregates. So it doesn't exist within the aggregates, either individually, collectively, or in any other relation. But the ascription, the use of the term I or the thought I to identify the collection of the aggregates is valid because it's commonly known in the world. That's one criterion that establishes this. Likewise, we can establish this through conventional avenues of valid cognition. That's the second criterion. And the contrary of that is that this use of the term I to identify the collection of the to identify ourselves is something which is not vitiated by conventional valid cognition. And then the third criterion is that this usage of the term I as an identity is not contradicted by the reasoning which investigates the ultimate nature of things.
Oh yeah, then I thought 아니 민기 타냐지 왕샤 삼도 왜 바라온도 매바데 아니 다 가사라 잡아나시 전에 띵어지 저기 도에 가서 치다 주지 다기 두셔니 시와 주시고라 려자 자 세계가 온다 세계가 간대지라 샤기도 오세나 아니 단다 시와나시 전에 아니 다시 풍보라 때네 초담라 때네 초범다 다시 풍보라 때네 낭잠다 어때라 쇼와마도 라왕가 매바죠 라왕도 저 매바죠 대신에 아니 치다난 거 청오 강가라 자야 되라 치다 주지다기 대신에 시와 대신 끌라 려자차 스팅을 제일 거 도이 가서 치다 주지다기 대신에 시와 대신 아니 최근에 만자버려 참아.
So there's a citation from the Samadhi Raja Sutra as well, the King of Meditative Concentration Sutra, which says, Lord Buddha said, that just as we use the notion I is applied or self occurs, you ought to understand all internal and external phenomena. What's this referring to is that when we have the collection of the aggregates, which is a valid basis of designation of the for I or self person, then that I or self or person appears. It appears, and that's valid. It's something that can be established and demonstrably, it's observed and can be demonstrably established. So just in the same way that the I or self is designated upon its basis of designation, we employ linguistic nominal conventions. That is, the conventions of language to identify things validly. So we do that not only with the self or the I, based upon its valid basis of designation, the collection of the aggregates, but we do the same thing with respect to all internal and external phenomena, and that is, we're not to understand, the Lord Buddha is saying there, we're not to understand that just as the notion I arises, so all internal and external things should be understood. We'll stop there.